Ready to go?
I'm ready.
I'm backing up again because this is a story that all you children, all the family ought to remember. There was a saying in the Wood family, they shouldn't have done it, Hallie. And my mother's name was Hallie. And when something would happen in the world, they would say, well, it shouldn't have happened, Hallie. Shouldn't have done it, Hallie. And where this shouldn't have done it, Hallie, came from was in Uvalde. They at that time they had outhouses. They didn't have indoor toilets, and there was a rattlesnake in the outhouse. And one of the girls came running in and said, "There's a rattlesnake in the outhouse." And my mother, being rather aggressive, grabbed my grandfather's shotgun and ran out there and put it down and shot it. And when she did, she was covered, and they had to hose her down. And they were hosing down. You shouldn't have done it, Hallie. And that statement stayed with the family for years. Anything that happened, they shouldn't have done it, Hallie.
But your sister's name was Hallie too?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay.
What about the time with the raccoon pushing?
Oh well, that was it was one of the Little East girls. We in Montel, when we built his first house, it was just a cabin. We did have an indoor toilet, but it was outdoors in a little separate room, and somebody left the door open. And anyway, Jane East went out there and was sitting down, and two little hands were pushing up on her. And a little coon was in there drinking water. That was quite an exciting experience when she came out of that outhouse.
If your dad had a Ford agency, did you start driving before you were 16 then?
Oh yes. In fact, I was given my father gave me an old Model T that was all torn up, and the mechanics helped show me what to do, and I rebuilt it from the ground up.
Before you were 16?
Yeah. Oh yeah. I was. I guess I was about 15 when I finally got it, and I would drive to school in it. And I remember one Halloween, Marcus Donahoe, which I'd remembered before, told you about before, was in it with me. And some older boys came in Halloween and said, pull Marcus out. And said, we're going to take Marcus and do something with him. And I saw him later, and I said, well, where is Marcus? And they said, if you'll go out to the cemetery, you'll find Marcus tied to a tombstone.
Oh.
So I went out and took him off the tombstone. And another instance I remembered was I really got in trouble with Marcus. We were walking along the railroad tracks with our air guns, and a freight train came by, and the caboose, the man on the caboose was leaning over, and we just couldn't resist it, and we shot him in the rib with our gun. And fortunately, the sheriff that came to talk to us about it was Marcus's uncle.
Oh.
So we got off of that problem.
You put a bullet in his bum?
Oh, it was BB.
Oh, baby, okay. I didn't know how much you really shot.
No, I was not a perfect child. Didn't by any means.
Did you like any girls in your high school?
Well, I remember my first love affair was with a girl named, let's see, her last name was Pickens, and I was courting her pretty hard, and I made the mistake one time giving her the nickname Easy Pickens. That broke up that romance.
Were you one of the taller guys in your high school?
Well, I was probably as tall as anybody.
Did you play any sports or anything?
I played football.
And then you went to A&M. Did you play football there?
No, I didn't.
But you joined the Corps there.
Yeah.
So you got to bypass being a private in the Army.
Mm-hmm. No,
So you just went-
I was an officer when I graduated from A&M.
Okay. So then when you entered the Army, you were an officer.
Yeah.
And then you just got promoted.
Yeah.
So then when you left the Army, you were...
I was major,
Okay.
but my last command, the paratrooper battalion, I was 26 years old. I was pretty young. In fact, I was one of the youngest men in the organization. The other thing that I remember that you might be interested in, because I worked in Iran also for about 3 months. They were having a lot of problems, and the head of the consortium at the time, they had a consortium that was owned by British Petroleum and Shell and Exxon, and a British Petroleum man was in charge of it, and things weren't going right, and they sent a man from Shell and one from British Petroleum and me, and we went there, and long and short of it, when we got through, we fired him and put a vice president from Exxon in his job, and I moved into the villa of the vice president that got promoted, and the people were a little suspicious of that. But at any rate, I always remember when I was in Iran, they wanted to show me they had assembly lines just like Henry Ford. You know, they had very little manufacturing or anything. They just live off the oil. And he wanted to show me they had an assembly line building samovars. A samovar is a brass instrument that you heat and make tea out of. And they had this assembly line, and everybody was putting something on. And at the end of the assembly line, they had a fellow with a little ball-peen hammer that was knocking little dents in it so they could sell it as antiques.
That's awful.
Tell us about there was one time you were telling us about Gaddafi wanted to commandeer your helicopter, and you were trying to get people off of a oil rig or something at the time. When the
Oh, well, when I got through with, well, after I'd been in Libya for a while, several years, they were starting up an offshore drilling operation, and they asked me to put it together. And I did, and it was real interesting because I had to take bids from all over the world, travel all over the world taking bids, started up to get it going. And when we got through, the low bidder was an Italian vessel, but the Libyan government wouldn't accept that bid, and I said, why? And they said, it's a naughty rig. And I said, what do you mean it's a naughty rig? They said, it's the low bidder. and they said, well, we were having a conflict with one of the other countries about ownership of the ocean, and we were drilling there, and the there were problems, and that country sent a warship out and started circling the rig because they said it was their property. And then Libya sent out warships, were circling the rigs, and it was an Italian vessel, so they sent out a warship circling the rigs. And during the night, this was a self-propelled vessel, and they cut the cables and sailed off. And in the morning, all these warships were circling, and the rig was gone. And that's a naughty vessel, so rig, so we're not going to use that. And so an American company got the bid. But after I'd been in overseas for a while, it was time. I'm getting near time for me to retire, because I was getting up. I was about 60 years old, and I thought they were going to give me a job back in the States, a golden oldie job, they thought. Well, instead, they made me the drilling operations manager for the United States, and with 100 rigs running, and I was having to I approved every contract, about 800 or 900 contracts a year. I had to carry a beeper and talk all the time, and yeah, it was a living nightmare. But at any rate, it was a real busy job, and it was a good job. But my salary had gotten so high at that time, and I had made a lot of money in investing in gold, and I was in the 70% tax bracket. 70% of what I earned went back to the government.
Wow.
And I decided it just wasn't worth it, so I retired. And that's the same thing that these Democrats are going to do to us, and we're going to have people quit working.
Yeah.
That are really know providing jobs.
Well, do you think it's a crazy idea then about how Huckabee wants to get rid of the IRS, and how he would tax make the sales tax so much higher, but then there wouldn't be an income tax every year?
Yeah, well, I think that's the right way to go, but there are so many special interests, I don't know if they'll ever float.
Right. But I mean, just in theory, though.
Yeah, no, I think it's good. Either that, a sales tax, or a sales tax on produce would be the way to go. That would be fair to everybody. Anybody that's buying anything would pay for it.
Right. Yeah, but you don't want to penalize people for being successful. That just seems like backwards of the American dream.
Yeah.
You just...
There's a book written by Anne Ryan, who is John Galt. And that's what John Galt did. He invented something in this book, and the government said, well, we're going to give each person according to its needs and rather than what they earned. And he took his invention with him and went to the mountains and was never seen again.
Tell us about your wedding day. Can you remember that?
Wait, let me get this last one.
Okay.
Tell us about the Wunderkinkers.
The
Where they well, I guess did they Libyanize it, and then you pulled out all the little bells and whistles?
Wunderkinker?
Yeah.
Well, there was a fella that used to just bore his friends to death because he would keep his mileage on his car, how many miles he got to the gallon, and would bore all his friends. And finally, they said, well, why don't you buy a Volkswagen? It'll really get you some good gas mileage. And he said, well, I think I'll do that. one of them said, but be real careful. They've got a Wunderkinker in the carburetor that wears out. And when you have, and you'll have to take care of that when it wears out. So he bought the Volkswagen, and at night they were slipping in his garage and pouring gasoline in his tank, and he was getting 100, 150 miles to the gallon. And finally they quit, and it suddenly dropped. And he was telling them all about it, and I'm not getting it anymore. The Wunderkinker worn out. And he went to the Volkswagen place and just with a friend and just almost pummeled them when they wouldn't sell him one of those Wunderkinkers to go in the carburetor.
Yeah, there was also one about I think it was overseas where they got one, or they were, I don't know if they were Libyanized the plant, where they took it away from Exxon or something, and then I think you said you had them go through and pull out all the little bitty parts and circuits that made things work.
No, what happened is Gaddafi made a rule. He said the corporation tax, we're raising it, and we're saying you owe it for 10 years back. And so Exxon owed them several $1 billion, and Exxon just pulled out of Libya when they did that. And they weren't going to pay them all that money, and they're backdating their taxes. And I was told by people, because I had been transferred by then, but I know when the expats pulled out, they pulled little springs out and all, and that operation just collapsed after we did that.